The pen felt like a lead weight in my hand. It was just a piece of plastic and ink, but it felt heavy enough to crush my bones. I looked at the line. The dotted line that was supposed to end 7 years of my life. Across from me, Brooks didn't even look up from his phone. He was scrolling, probably checking the stock market or texting her, the woman who made him realize I was suffocating his potential. "Just sign it, Harper," he said. His voice was so cold it made my skin crawl. No emotion. No regret. Just a man waiting for a business transaction to close. "I've already let you keep the SUV. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man I'd worked 2 jobs for while he finished his law degree. The man I'd stayed up with until 3 a.m., editing his briefs and making sure his suits were pressed for every court appearance. And now I was an inconvenience. A line item on a ledger that needed to be erased. "Sign." My hand shook, but I did it. "There," I whispered. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. "It's done." Brooks stood up immediately, snapping his phone shut. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't even offer a good luck. He just grabbed his designer briefcase and straightened his tie in the mirror of the lawyer's office. He looked successful. He looked free. "Good. My attorney will handle the rest of the filing. You have 48 hours to get the rest of your things out of the house. Sloane wants to start redecorating on Monday." Sloane. The woman he'd been seeing for 6 months behind my back. The woman who was more in tune with his lifestyle. I walked out of that office into the pouring rain, feeling absolutely hollow. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have much of a savings account because I'd poured everything into our life. I stood on the sidewalk, getting drenched, and that's when the first wave hit me. It wasn't just sadness. It was a physical, violent heave of my stomach. I barely made it to a public trash can before I lost everything. My throat burned, my chest ached, and as I wiped my mouth, a terrifying thought crept into my mind. I hadn't had my period in 6 weeks. I'd told myself it was just the stress of the divorce, the fighting, the betrayal. I walked to the nearest pharmacy, my legs feeling like jelly. I bought the box with the 2 pink lines on the front. I went into a cramped, dirty stall in a nearby cafe. Waited. 3 minutes. Felt like 3 centuries. When I looked down, the world stopped spinning. 2 lines. Bright, bold, and unapologetic. I was pregnant. With the baby of the man who just kicked me out for a newer model. I sank onto the floor of that bathroom stall and sobbed. Not because I was happy, but because I was terrified. I was alone, broke, and carrying the legacy of a man who didn't want me. But as I sat there, a hand suddenly knocked on the stall door. "Ma'am, are you all right in there?" It wasn't a woman's voice. It was deep, resonant, and carried a strange authority that made me stop breathing. I scrambled to my feet, shoving the pregnancy test into my bag. I wiped my face with a rough paper towel, trying to breathe through the panic. I looked like a wreck. My mascara was smeared, my hair was matted from the rain, and my eyes were bloodshot. I opened the door and for a second I forgot how to speak. Standing there wasn't a janitor or a concerned barista. It was a man in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire marriage. He was tall, imposing actually, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through the mask I was trying to wear. This was the kind of man who didn't wait in lines. I'm fine," I stammered, trying to push past him. He didn't move. He didn't block me aggressively, but his presence was like a wall. "You don't look fine. You look like the world just ended." "Maybe it did," I snapped. I didn't have the energy for politeness. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to go dismantle." I brushed past him and headed for the exit of the cafe, but the rain had turned into a full-blown deluge. The sky was black. I stood at the threshold, shivering in my thin cardigan, realizing I didn't even have enough money for a long Uber ride to the outskirts where my sister lived. "Where are you going?" He was behind me again. He wasn't hovering, he was just there. "Away," I said, my voice cracking. "In this. You'll catch pneumonia before you reach the corner. He signaled toward the curb where a sleek, black sedan was idling. A driver jumped out with an umbrella. Get in. I'll drop you wherever you need to go. I don't get into cars with strangers, I said, my pride flaring up through the exhaustion. He gave a dry, short laugh. I'm Caleb Sterling. If I wanted to kidnap someone, I'd choose someone who doesn't look like they're about to faint on my shoes. I'm just a man who hates seeing things break. And right now you look very broken. The name Caleb Sterling rang a bell. Sterling Global. He was the man the papers called the architect of industry. He was ruthless in business, a recluse in private. Why was he at a random cafe on a Tuesday? I looked at the rain. I looked at my shaking hands. I thought about the tiny life inside me. I didn't have the luxury of being stubborn anymore. Fine, I whispered. The car was silent and smelled of expensive leather and cedarwood. I sat as far away from him as possible, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. I felt his gaze on me, but he didn't ask questions. He didn't offer platitudes. He just let me exist in the silence. But as we pulled up to the modest apartment complex I still shared with Brooks, I saw his car in the driveway. And I saw Sloane. She was standing in the window, holding a glass of wine, laughing. My heart shattered all over again. Is that home? Caleb asked quietly. No, I said, the bitterness leaking out. That's a crime scene. I opened the door to get out, but Caleb reached out and caught my wrist. His grip wasn't tight, but it was firm. You left something in the cafe, he said. He held out a small white plastic stick. The pregnancy test. It must have fallen out of my bag when I was rushing. My heart stopped. I looked at him, waiting for the judgment, the pity, or the smirk. But his face was like granite. If you go in there now, they'll win, he said. Do you want them to win? I don't have a choice, I sobbed. I have nothing. Caleb looked at the house, then back at me. Everyone has a choice. Some people just need a better strategist. He handed me a card. It wasn't a business card. It just had a phone number and a single word, tomorrow. Go in, get your things, and don't say a word about that baby, he commanded. If you want a different life, call that number at 8 a.m. I watched the car disappear into the night. I had no idea why a billionaire was talking to a ghost like me. I didn't know that Brooks was watching from the window, wondering who was in that expensive car. All I knew was that for the first time in 7 years, someone had told me I had a choice. Who was that? Brooks's voice cut through the sound of the rain like a dull blade. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, looking down at me as I climbed the steps. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat felt like it was full of glass. I just walked past him, heading for the bedroom to grab the last of my life. Harper, I asked you a question, he barked, following me. Some guy in a $500,000 car drops you off and you think you can just ignore me? Is that where you've been? Finding a new benefactor already? Fast worker. I stopped at the edge of the bed we'd picked out together. I turned around, and for the first time I didn't feel the need to explain myself. We signed the papers, Brooks. My life is no longer your business. Just like your life with Sloane isn't mine. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Don't get high and mighty. You're broke. You're a failed freelance illustrator with no family left. You'll be begging me for an alimony increase within a month. I'm doing you a favor letting you stay at your sister's. I don't want your favors, I said, shoving my clothes into a suitcase. He stepped closer, his shadow looming over me. You're pathetic. You think some rich guy is going to save you. Men like that use girls like you for a weekend and then throw them back into the gutter. At least I gave you 7 years. I felt the sting of tears, but I refused to let them fall. I thought about the test in my bag. I thought about the tiny heartbeat I hadn't even heard yet. He didn't deserve to know. He didn't deserve to even breathe the same air as this child. Get out, Brooks, I said quietly. It's my house now, he reminded me. I'll leave when I'm ready. I spent the night on the floor of the nursery, the room we had planned to paint blue or yellow, the room that was now filled with Sloane's yoga equipment and designer shopping bags. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Caleb Sterling's cold, gray eyes. Why would he help me? A man like that doesn't do anything for free. Morning came with a brutal headache and more nausea. I dragged my suitcases to the curb at 7:30 a.m. Brooks didn't even come out to say goodbye. He just watched from the window while Sloane sipped coffee in my favorite mug. I looked at the card Caleb had given me. Tomorrow. It was 8 a.m. Dialed. Sterling, the voice answered. No hello. No who is this. Just the name. It's Harper. From the cafe. There was a pause. I could hear the sound of a private jet engine in the background. There's a black car at the end of your street. Get in it. We're going to a doctor. What? No, I can't. I don't like repeating myself, Harper. You're carrying a Sterling global secret now. Until I decide what to do with you, you are under my protection. Move. My heart hammered against my ribs. A secret. What did he mean? I wasn't carrying his baby. But something in his tone told me that if I didn't get in that car, I would be drowning in Brooks's shadow forever. I walked to the car. As we drove away, I looked back at the house. Brooks was coming out to get the mail. He saw me in the back of the car, the same car from last night, and his jaw dropped. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of something other than contempt on his face. I saw doubt. But as the car sped up, my stomach did a somersault. I wasn't just running away. I was stepping into the lion's den. Where is Mr. Sterling? Asked the driver. He's waiting for you at the clinic, ma'am. He's already cleared the floor. The clinic was silent, smelling of eucalyptus and expensive air filters. I felt out of place in my worn-out jeans and oversized sweater. Caleb walked beside me, his presence so commanding that the nurses bowed their heads as we passed. Why are you doing this? I whispered as we were ushered into a private ultrasound suite. You don't know me. You're a billionaire. I'm a divorcee with nothing. Caleb stopped and turned to face me. He didn't lean in. He didn't have to. Brooks Lawson is trying to merge his firm with one of my subsidiaries. He's arrogant, he's sloppy, and he treats people like disposable assets. I don't like his face. And I certainly don't like the way he treats his assets. I wasn't an asset, I whispered. No, Caleb said, his eyes softening just a fraction. You were the engine. He just didn't realize he was running on stolen fuel. Now sit down. The doctor came in, a world-renowned specialist I'd only seen on news segments. She applied the cold gel to my stomach, and I braced myself. Then the sound filled the room. Thump, 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 thump. It was the fastest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. My breath hitched. Tears finally broke through, streaming down my face. It was real. There was a life inside me, fighting to exist despite the chaos. 6 weeks, the doctor said, smiling. Strong heartbeat. Everything looks perfect. I looked at the screen, a tiny flickering pixel of hope. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Caleb. His touch was heavy, grounding. That's the only thing that matters now, he said. His voice was no longer cold. It was protective. The man who threw you out doesn't get to touch this. He doesn't get to name it. He doesn't even get to know it exists until I say so. He'll find out, I said, a wave of fear hitting me. He'll sue for custody just to hurt me. He's like that. Caleb looked at the doctor, who took that as her cue to leave the room. He sat down in the chair opposite me. He won't, Caleb said. Because as of today, you are the new creative director of Sterling Life. You'll have a salary that triples his, a legal team that makes his look like public defenders, and a penthouse in the city. I stared at him, my mouth agape. I can't. I'm an artist, Caleb. I haven't worked in a corporate office in years. And I'm pregnant. I'll be on maternity leave in months. I don't care about the office, Caleb dismissed. I care about the optics. Brooks thinks you're nothing. I'm going to show the world you're the woman who makes Sterling look good. We'll announce the pregnancy when the time is right, as a celebration of a new era, not as a scandal. And what do you get out of this? I asked, my voice trembling. Nobody does this out of the goodness of their heart. Caleb stood up, adjusting his cuffs. Brooks is trying to impress the board of Evergreen. If he finds out his pathetic ex-wife is suddenly the star of the industry, he'll lose his mind. He'll make mistakes. He'll crumble. And then, I'll buy his company for pennies and fire him myself. It was cold. It was calculated. It was a revenge plot. You're using me, I said. I'm giving you a sword, Caleb corrected. Whether you swing it or not is up to you. But if you want to protect that baby, you need to be powerful. Are you in? I looked at the ultrasound image in my hand. I thought about Brooks's smug face, Sloane's wine glass, and the cold rain on the sidewalk. I'm in, I said. The next 24 hours were a blur of high-end fabrics, stinging skin treatments, and lessons in posture. Caleb didn't just send me to a stylist. He stayed there. He sat in a velvet chair, sipping espresso, while tailors draped silk over my shoulders and hairstylists transformed my dull, stressed locks into a waterfall of mahogany waves. She looks too fragile, Caleb said to the lead stylist, pointing at a pale pink dress. Something stronger. Midnight blue. Or emerald. They brought out an emerald silk gown that clung to my curves that were just beginning to hint at the pregnancy. It had a high neck and an open back, looking like liquid gold against my skin. When I stepped out of the dressing room, the entire shop went silent. Caleb stood up. For the first time I saw his eyes widen. Just for a second. That will do, he said softly. The gala was held at the Museum of Art. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the hum of the city's elite. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. Keep your chin up, Caleb whispered as we stepped out of the limo. He offered his arm. You're not Harper the divorcee tonight. You're Harper, the woman who holds the keys to my brand. We walked in, and the flashbulbs were blinding. Caleb Sterling rarely appeared at public events, and never with a woman. The murmur followed us like a wave. And then I saw him. Brooks was across the room, looking sharp in a tuxedo, Sloane on his arm in a dress that was far too tight and a shade of red that screamed for attention. He was laughing, holding a champagne flute, playing the part of the rising star. Then he turned. He saw Caleb first. His eyes lit up. He probably thought this was his chance to make a pitch. He started walking toward us, pulling Sloane along. But as he got closer, his smile began to falter. He looked at the woman on Caleb's arm. He stopped dead in his tracks. Harper, he gasped. His voice was loud enough to draw stares. What the hell are you doing here? I didn't flinch. I didn't hide. I felt Caleb's arm tighten slightly against mine, a silent reminder of my power. I'm working, Brooks, I said, my voice smooth and steady. Mr. Sterling has been kind enough to bring me on as his new creative director. I believe you were looking for an introduction. Brooks's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, shock, and then a searing, ugly rage. Sloane looked me up and down, her eyes full of venom. Creative director. Brooks scoffed. Caleb, I don't know what she told you, but she's been out of the game for years. 'Cause she's unstable. We just finalized the divorce yesterday. Caleb stepped forward, his presence suddenly suffocating. I'm well aware of your history, Brooks. In fact, it was Harper's unstable brilliance that caught my eye. It's a shame you didn't know what you had. But then again, some men are better suited for simpler tastes. He glanced briefly at Sloane, who looked like she'd been slapped. Now, Caleb continued, if you'll excuse us, we have more important people to speak with. Owen Brooks. Don't bother calling my office about the Evergreen merger. We've decided to move in a different direction. The color drained from Brooks's face. That merger was everything to him. Without it, his firm was dead in the water. Wait, Caleb. But we were already walking away. I felt a surge of adrenaline I'd never known. I looked back over my shoulder and saw Brooks standing in the middle of the ballroom, looking small. But as the night wore on, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a sudden sharp cramp in my abdomen. I gripped Caleb's hand, my face going pale. "Caleb," I whispered. "Something's wrong." The hospital room was quiet, the only sound the steady beep of the monitor. Caleb hadn't left. He was sitting in the corner, his laptop open, but his eyes were on me. "The doctor says it was just a localized stress reaction," he said, his voice low. "Dehydration and exhaustion. The baby is fine. But you're grounded, Harper. No more galas for a week." "I'm sorry," I said, looking at the ceiling. "I thought I was stronger." "You are strong," Caleb said. He stood up and walked to the bed. "But you're carrying a human being. That takes its own kind of strength. Don't apologize for being human." I looked at him. "Why are you really doing this, Caleb? It's not just about Brooks, is it?" He was silent for a long time. He looked out the window at the city lights. "My mother was like you. Brilliant. Creative. And she was married to a man who took everything from her. Her ideas, her confidence, and eventually her life. He broke her because he was afraid of how bright she shone. I promised myself I would never let that happen again. Not on my watch." It was the first time I'd seen a crack in his armor. He wasn't just a shark. He was a man with a ghost of his own. The door burst open before I could respond. It was Brooks. He looked disheveled, his tie undone. He was sweating. "I knew it," he breathed, looking at me in the bed, then at Caleb. "I knew there was something else." Caleb stood up, his face returning to its frozen mask. "Get out, Lawson. You're trespassing." "I'm her husband," Brooks yelled. "Ex-husband," I corrected, my voice trembling. "I saw the way you were holding your stomach at the gala," Brooks said, ignoring Caleb. He walked toward the bed, his eyes wild. "You're pregnant, aren't you? That's why you disappeared. That's why Caleb is playing knight in shining armor. Is it mine? Or did you jump into his bed before the ink was dry?" "How dare you," I whispered. "If it's mine, I have rights." Brooks shouted. "I'm not letting you use my child to climb the social ladder with Sterling. I'll take you to court. I'll prove you're unfit. I'll tell them you were having an affair with him." Caleb moved so fast it was a blur. He had Brooks by the throat, pinning him against the hospital wall. "Listen to me very carefully," Caleb hissed. "If you ever speak to her like that again, I won't just ruin your business. I will erase you. Do you understand? You signed away your rights to her life yesterday. And as for the baby, you don't deserve to even know its name." The weeks that followed were surreal. Caleb moved me into a penthouse suite in one of his buildings. It wasn't just a place to live. It was a fortress. There was a private chef who specialized in prenatal nutrition, a personal trainer for light yoga, and a room filled with every art supply I could ever dream of. "I feel like I'm in a golden cage," I told Caleb one evening as we sat on the balcony. "It's not a cage," he said, handing me a glass of sparkling cider. "It's a pedestal. There's a difference." A campaign launched. The Harper Collection. It featured my sketches, raw, emotional charcoal drawings of women in various stages of struggle and triumph. The world ate it up. I became an overnight sensation. "The pregnant artist who defied a tycoon" was the headline of every magazine. I was glowing. For the first time in years, I was eating well, sleeping well, and my belly was starting to show. Felt beautiful. Meanwhile, Brooks was spiraling. Every time I turned on the news, another one of his clients had dropped him. Sloane had been spotted at a bar, shouting about how the bitch ruined everything. They were losing their house. They were losing their status. But Brooks wasn't done. I was leaving a doctor's appointment, this time with 4 security guards, when a man approached. He wasn't Brooks. He was an older man, gray-haired, holding a folder. "Ms. Harper, I have something for you." My security intercepted him, but he threw the folder on the ground. It's a subpoena, paternity test and a custody injunction. Mr. Lawson is claiming that you are mentally unstable and that the child is being used for corporate espionage. I felt the blood drain from my face. Corporate espionage. Brooks was insane. He's trying to claim I'm a spy. I whispered as Caleb's head of security ushered me into the car. He's desperate, Caleb said when I told him later. He was pacing his office, his jaw tight. He's trying to get a judge to grant him an emergency injunction. If he wins, he could force you into a psychiatric evaluation. He can't do that, I cried. I'm perfectly fine. In his world, money talks, Caleb said. And he still has a few friends in the judiciary. But he's forgotten one thing. What? I own the bank they use. Caleb sat down at his desk and made a single phone call. Yes. Call in the Lawson loans. All of them. And send the file on his Sloan offshore accounts to the IRS. I think it's time Brooks had a real problem to deal with. He hung up and looked at me. Harper, I need you to trust me. There's going to be a hearing in 3 days. Brooks is going to try to humiliate you. He's going to bring up every mistake you ever made. Are you ready to face him? I'm ready to end him, I said. I sat in the penthouse, a photo clutched in my hand that had been mailed to me anonymously. The woman in the picture was beautiful, radiant even, but there was a sadness in her eyes that looked familiar. She looked like me. When Caleb came home that night, I didn't greet him with a smile. I showed him the photo. He froze. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice a low growl. It doesn't matter, I said. Is it true? Am I just part of a pattern? Did you save her to get to someone else too? Was she your creative director, before she became a failed project? Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. He looked tired, really tired, for the first time since I met him. He sat down on the sofa, dropping his head into his hands. Her name was Ava, he whispered. She was my wife. Gasp. You were married. 10 years ago. I was just starting Sterling Global. I was like Brooks. Ambitious, cold, obsessed with the bottom line. I didn't see her. I didn't see how much she was struggling. I used her talent to build my brand, and I told myself I was doing it for US. But I was doing it for me. He looked up at me, his eyes red. She was pregnant, and I pushed her. I made her go to events, made her work late, made her the face of the company when she just wanted to be a mother. One night, after a heated argument about a merger, she left. She was in a car accident. I lost them both. My wife and my daughter. The room went still. The anger I felt evaporated, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. I didn't help you to get revenge on Brooks, Harper, Caleb said, his voice cracking. I mean, that was part of it. But the real reason is that when I saw you in that cafe, I saw her. I saw the moment my life ended. And I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't let another brilliant woman be destroyed by a man who didn't deserve her. I walked over and sat beside him. I didn't know what to say. I'm so sorry, Caleb. I don't want your pity, he said, regaining his composure. But you need to know you aren't a project. You're the second chance I never thought I'd get. Brooks sent you that photo to drive a wedge between us. He wants you to feel alone so he can swoop in and save you from the big bad billionaire. It won't work, I said firmly. I took his hand. I'm not her, Caleb. And you aren't the man you were 10 years ago. We're going to that hearing, and we're going to finish this. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was swarmed with reporters. Brooks was there, looking smug, flanked by a team of lawyers. Sloan was nowhere to be seen. I'd heard she'd left him the moment his bank accounts were frozen. Harper, Brooks said as we passed in the hallway. Last chance. Drop the Creative Director Act, give me joint custody, and I'll tell the judge you were just confused. Otherwise, I'm going to tell everyone about your relationship with Caleb. The world doesn't like a gold digger, even a pregnant one. Stop. I looked at him. This man I had once loved. This man who was now just a collection of bitterness and cheap suits. Brooks, I said loud enough for the reporters to hear. The only person who's confused here is you. You think you're a player in a game you've already lost. My baby will never know your name. We walked into the courtroom. The judge was a stern woman with no patience for theatrics. Brooks's lawyer stood up and began a tirade about my sudden wealth and unstable lifestyle. But then Caleb's lawyer stood up. He produced a set of documents, records of Brooks's secret gambling debts, his attempts to embezzle from his own firm, and most importantly, the psychological report showing Brooks's history of verbal abuse. Mr. Lawson isn't here for his child, Caleb's lawyer said. He's here because he's bankrupt. He wants a payout. The judge looked at Brooks. Mr. Lawson, is it true that your firm filed for Chapter 11 this morning? Brooks turned white. That's a temporary setback. It has everything to do with it, the judge snapped. You are seeking custody of a child you cannot support. This petition is dismissed. The gavel hit the wood. It was over. Brooks didn't even make it out of the courthouse before the police were waiting. Not for the custody case, for the fraud. Caleb had been thorough. Every gray area Brooks had ever stepped into was now a bright red flag for the authorities. I watched from the top of the marble steps as they led him away in handcuffs. He looked back at me, his eyes full of a pathetic, desperate plea. Harper, help me. Talk to Caleb. Tell him I'm sorry. I didn't say a word. I just placed my hand on my stomach and felt a soft, fluttering kick. Justice, I thought. A few days later I was back in the penthouse, finally feeling like I could breathe. The Harper collection was a massive success, but I decided to take a step back. I didn't want to be a face anymore. I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be a mother. Caleb came in carrying a small box. For the baby, he said. Inside was a tiny, hand-knitted silver rattle. It belonged to my family, he said. I want you to have it. I looked at him. Caleb, you've done so much. But I can't stay here forever. I need to build a life that's mine. Not yours, and certainly not Brooks's. He nodded, a sad but respectful smile on his face. I know. I've already set up a trust for the baby. And I've bought a small cottage in Aspen. It's in your name. No strings. No projects. Just a place for you to paint and for the baby to grow up. Why? Asked. Because, he said, stepping closer. You taught me that you can't own a queen. You can only hope she lets you walk beside her for a while. I moved into the cottage a month later. It was perfect. The air was crisp, the light was golden, and for the first time in my life I was truly free. But one evening, as I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, a car pulled up. It wasn't Caleb's car. It was a beat-up, rusted sedan. A woman got out. She looked tired, her clothes were worn. Harper, she asked. Yes. My name is Sloane. Brooks. He's in prison. He took everything I had. I have nowhere else to go. He told me. He told me you were the only person who ever truly cared about anyone in that house. I looked at the woman who had helped destroy my marriage. I looked at the woman who had laughed as my things were thrown into the rain. The old Harper would have slammed the door. The old Harper would have screamed. But the new Harper, the queen. I looked at my pregnant belly. I looked at the peaceful life I'd built. I'm not going to give you money, Sloane, I said. And I'm not going to be your friend. But there's a shelter in the next town that I support. I'll call them. They'll give you a bed and a chance to start over. That's more than Brooks ever gave either of us. She started to cry. Thank you. I'm so sorry. We never do, I said softly. Until we stop looking at the mask. As she drove away, I felt the final piece of the past fall away. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a project. I was a woman who had survived the storm. 6 months later, the sound of the mountain wind was the backdrop to the most beautiful sound in the world. A baby's first cry. My daughter Willow was born on a Tuesday. She had my eyes and a spirit that already seemed too big for her tiny body. Caleb was the first person I called. He arrived at the hospital within the hour, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "She's perfect," he whispered, holding her as if she were made of glass. "She's a sterling," I joked. "Look at that stubborn chin." He laughed, and for the first time it was a sound of pure joy. "No, she's a Harper. She's a fighter." Brooks tried to write to me from prison. He sent letters filled with apologies, then threats, then more apologies. I never opened them. I didn't need to. His voice no longer had any power over me. He was a ghost, and I was living in the light. I continued to paint. My work became even more famous, not because of the scandal, but because of the truth in it. I painted mothers, I painted survivors, and I painted the quiet moments of peace that come after the war. Caleb and I didn't rush into anything. We spent weekends at the cottage, him teaching me about business, me teaching him how to slow down and see the colors in the sky. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was a partnership based on respect and shared scars. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Willow sleeping in a bassinet between us, I looked at the horizon. I used to think my life ended when I signed those papers.